Good evening, everybody, and we're back again. We've had a little bit of a break since the end of the season, but we're back with another Up the Dale podcast. I'm Neil Harvey, and joining me tonight is my usual co-host, Mr. David Maguire. Good evening, Dave.
Evening, Neil. Hope you're wintering well.
Well, yes, we'll get to that shortly. Joining us, we are very, very pleased to have a special guest. We've had some in the past in the shape of professional players, Stephen Croft and Lewis Rees, and we wanted to change it up over the winter and get different personalities from different aspects of cricket. And we're delighted to say Dan Norcross, Test match special commentator and all-round cricket knowledge bod, has joined us and is prepared to answer some of our Jeremy Paxman-esque questions on his history and time in cricket. So, Dan, really, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure. Well, I say it's an absolute pleasure. I thought it was going to be a pleasure. Now you mentioned Paxo, so I'm slightly nervous now. But no, it's lovely to be here, especially with autumn coming, the leaves dropping, and the sort of the sadness that comes with that. It's hard for us all, isn't it? But you know, we power on, and we put our shoulder to the wheel, and we keep going. And before you know it, it'll be end of March, beginning of April. We can kick off all over again.
Absolutely, and it's from us. It's very much that we're trying to keep this going over the winter period to give everybody a bit of cricket activity. So that's exactly why we're here. So thanks again. We're going to kick things off, and talking of the Jeremy Paxman-esque, Dave has this reputation with, particularly with Stephen Croft, who found Dave's questions very taxing and very digging deep. Dave's going to kick off and dig into your past a bit, Dan. So Dave, I'll hand over to you to kick things off.
Well, thanks, Neil. What an introduction. So Dan, yeah, thanks very much for speaking with us. As Neil said, obviously you're most well known for being one of the guys on TMS and doing the commentary, which has served us all great during the past summer, in particular, with very little else going on. But I just wanted to go back right to the start of your time in cricket and sort of how you first got into the game, and sort of thinking about your earliest cricketing memories, your first heroes, you know, that type of thing. What was it that sort of sparked your interest first off?
You know, because it's been going on for so long, it's almost like I feel like I probably came out of the womb with it. I've got to confess, and it is a confession, that I'm half Yorkshire and I'm half Surrey. So my mum was from Yorkshire, my dad was from Surrey, and my granddad actually, when my mother was about to give birth, sort of kidnapped my mum and tried to drive her to Yorkshire. So because that was in the days when, you know, you had to be born in Yorkshire to play for Yorkshire.
Yeah.
And so I think I probably registered that something was up even before I emerged from my mother's womb into the light, you know, because there had been all this argument going on. Luckily, my dad kind of stopped it halfway up the M1 and got me born in my rightful place in Clapham in southwest London, almost within earshot of the Oval. So in seriousness, I think it was 1975 when I first became really aware of cricket, because as I get to the age of about 6, you sort of start to wonder where your dad is. You know, like when you're really little, you don't think about anybody else in the house or really care. You're just doing what you do, and you know your mum or dad, whoever it is doing it for you, know, brings you food and keeps you going. And then I sort of thought, well, you know, where is Dad? It's weird, isn't it, in the summers? And he was always in the sitting room with the curtains closed. I just remember like really sunny, hot days, and I'd be out in the paddling pool, giddily splashing about, and Dad would be in the sitting room. And I'd go in and see that he was just watching the telly in the days when it was on the BBC, and it was wall to wall. You know, in those days, you had John Player League, Benson and Edges, Gillette Cup. These are all weird terms for your younger members, but basically one-day competitions. Think of the 100, only it's on the BBC and it's on every day. And it sort of was. It was on from sort of May all the way through till September, finishing with the grand final, you know, the Gillette Cup final as it then was. And he was always in there whenever cricket was on. So if I was going to have a conversation with my dad, I had to go in there and watch it.
Yeah.
And being half from Yorkshire, my granddad being obsessed with cricket, when I saw him and he saw that I was watching the cricket, I was given, you know, The first book I was given by my granddad was The History of Yorkshire Cricket from 1864 to 1953. This, arbitrary dates.
Got that on his shelf.
Yeah. It was like, 89 years of Yorkshire cricket just randomly selected, busy because they were at their best. And the moment Surrey got good, they were like, oh, stop that. There's no more cricket, and it had been written before the great Yorkshire team of the 60s happened. So, and I used to sit and read that. And then I was given this book, The Pictorial History of Ashes series by David Frith. And it was the most intoxicating thing I'd ever seen in my life. I remember at like 7 years old, just going back and looking at the first test match, 1876-77 at the MCG, when we lost by 45 runs. And every game had a really tiny match report, and it had pictures. And even when there weren't photographs, it had like cartoons from the period. And I became engrossed in this. I just kept looking at these exotic characters with their massive moustaches, and I worked my way through to Bodyline, and Douglas Jardine became my hero. And then I became obsessed with the numbers. So, I mean, it's a long-winded way of saying, but if you want my first heroes, they were John Edridge at Surrey. There was Brian Close, because of the 76 series against the West Indies, was the first one I actually properly watched. 75, I went in and out the room, 76, I got the bug. I was 7 years old then. Viv Richards, because I was just spellbound by the way he stroked the wicket. And then, of course, Ian Botham and David Gower. They were the ones, and Geoffrey Boycott. That 1977 series with Boycott and Ian Botham, and then in 78, when Gower came along. And, your mind plays tricks on you when you're a kid. So by the time I was, when I was 7, I didn't think I could ever, be good enough to play cricket. By the time I was 9, I thought, I'm 2 or 3 years away from national selection. So when David Gower turned up, I thought, he's my inspiration. If I could be like him, I could play for England in no time. I mean, obviously, it's all nuts. But those were the people that really got me into it. And I became obsessive, so obsessive that, my family hated me for it. We used to play this game called Botticelli, when you've got to say, I am B, and, it's like J.S. Bach or Ludwig van Beethoven or something. And I was the youngest in a family of 4, and they would all pick these people. Everyone like Richard Nixon, what have you, because he was famous when I was a kid. And I would choose Tom Richardson, the Surrey fast bowler in the 1880s and 90s. And they could never get it. And they were absolutely pissed off with me big time. And it was but I won the game, because they just couldn't do it. And I look at it and go, how do you not know who Tom Richardson is, or George Lohman, or Jeff, George Hurst and Wilf Rhodes, and, these members of my family were like 16, 17, going, oh, what he says, he's cheating.
Wrong with a bit of niche knowledge.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's where all the kind of annoying old cricket nonsense comes from. It was sort of drilled in at a very early age.
So did you take that knowledge on and actually play the game? Did you play school cricket, club cricket? Have you got any memorable performances that stay with you?
Yeah, I mean, I played it obsessively because I was convinced when I was little that I was destined for greatness, which was so far from the truth. It's risible now, isn't it? But I suppose that kind of fantasy is what keeps us all going in club cricket. Yeah, I played at school from the age of 9. The first game I played, this could be a very long conversation if I'm not careful. First game we played, it was Dulwich College under 11s against UCS, school in London. We were bowled out for 4, all out for 4. A chap called Elder took 8 for 2. He ended up being a rugby league professional in Australia. And I got a duck, but I developed my hatred of leg byes because I featured in the largest partnership of the innings of 2 out of a total of 4, one of which was a leg bye, which I thought I deserved to have for myself because I'd scored the run as far as I was concerned. I then dropped a catch when they were on 4 for 5, and they got over the line. In the end, we won by they won by 4 wickets in a a low scoring encounter, you know, basically
Okay.
9 runs were scored and 16 wickets fell. And then I was dropped from the next game and I cried myself to sleep. I don't think I've ever been more upset. Both my parents are dead, and I don't think I've ever cried quite such salt tears as the day I was dropped from the under 11s, which tells you something about me that's not good. I suspect. I think I had less perspective of that in those days, to be fair to me. And then I continued to play at school at a reasonable level. You know, I captained the thirds, I played in the second 11, played 1 or 2 games for the first. So I was never quite good enough. My best performance for the school, I still maintain, was drawing a match against our bitter rivals, Dulwich College Prep School, who was like the Celtic and Rangers of under 11 cricket. And they'd scored like 95 all out. We were 25 for 6, and I'd opened the batting, and I batted for 96 minutes for 6 runs. Because, you know, I knew the game at that age, so I knew we could only get out of it with a draw, and I had to keep on coaxing the kid at the other end, go, don't try and hit the ball, just, you know, just stop it, you know. And I got like a commendation at school for that. So I think that affected the way I then played cricket, because I got given a reward for batting really horribly. And, you know, 6 in 96 minutes is not good. They didn't bother counting balls in those days. And then, because I love cricket so much, and you'll be very familiar with this from club cricket, I ended up joining my local club, my old boys club, the Old Alanians, which is confusingly, or was confusing, the old boys of Dulwich College, the school I went to. And because I turned up every week, you get made captain, not because you're good. So you start as captain of the Sunday team, and then you're captain of the second 11 before you know it, because you're prepared to make all the telephone calls because you love the game so much. In club cricket, my best performances were I got when I was at university. The cricket ground that we played on had a bar that you signed a little chit for your beer, which you didn't have to pay until the following term. So, you know, like when you're 19, 20 years old, October, it might as well be, you know, you might as well be 90.
Yeah.
When you're in the bar in May and you've got to pay a bill in October, woof, have I? Really? Who gives a shit? So that meant I was incentivized to practice. So I went every day, bought beer on a chit, even worked out that you could sign someone else's name, so you didn't even have to pay it in October. And like a lot of things, if you do it over and over and over and over again, you get quite good at it, don't you?
Yeah.
So I was practicing 7 days a week, and then came back to my club and played with proper practice for the first time after having lots of nets. I got 280 in consecutive weeks.
Hell.
And that was quite definitely the high point. And from then on, it was a slow slide to obscurity. I remember appearing in the Surrey Championship handbook. My captain wrote about me the year before I took over the second 11 captaincy. He said, Norcross's average is the same as his expected arrival time at the game. We used to start at 1:30, and it is his average is 13.27, which was a brutal put down, really. But yeah, so by the time I left uni and had to sort of have a job and didn't have access to facilities, I very much came back into the pack and descended into the talentless, hopeless, but incredibly enthusiastic buffoon that I have remained to this very day. And I played club cricket obsessively until my early 40s, and then started on this career of watching it and sort of getting paid to talk about it. And then, unfortunately, club cricket gets very difficult to play because the professionals very unfairly play at the weekends quite a lot, and then you get called into doing that, and it rather screws up your entire cricket playing career. You just end up doing jazz hat charity games, which are great fun, but you know, you literally pick up your bat for the first time in June, pull a hamstring within 10 minutes of appearing on the field, top edge your ball to point, trying to hoik it over deep mid wicket, going in completely opposite direction, and walk off feeling terribly miserable about yourself. Another long answer, sorry.
No, I was going to say, if if an average of 13 is obscurity, then I'd hate to think where I am. To be honest, I've had more zeros than the Olympic rings, to be honest, this season.
Are you good on the phone and on email and WhatsApp? I bet you get the team out though, don't you?
No, I'll leave that to Mr. Harvey.
That's my job. Although, Dan, I will have to sort of butt in here because Dave's desperate for me not to mention his similar innings to yourself of, now correct me, Dave, because I will get this wrong, 4 from 94 balls.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Rock on. That's brilliant. Did you draw the game?
We won the game.
You won the game? What were you set?
Like? We were chasing something like 80
odd, yeah.
I opened the innings, and it was one where if we won the game, we would have probably avoided relegation. So I opened the innings, and I was there for all that time, grinding out one end for everybody else to basically score the runs.
Dave, that is proper cricket. You see, what you've done is you've seen off the new ball. You've allowed all the jazz hatters to wander in. You know, they've driven in their the 1970s equivalent of the Ford Capri. You know, or 2020 equivalent of the Ford Capri. They're all fancy. They've got the nice haircut. They've got the great clothes. You know, they'll have 2 pints and then they'll bugger off to a party later. But you have ensured that the next year they're going to be playing at a proper level. You never get the credit for it. You never get the love you deserve. It's because you've got cricket smarts. And all they give a shit about is, you know, copping off with Josephine or whoever it is that, you know, they've got their eye on.
This is all true, Dan, but the problem was, with 1 to win, I tried to play a Hollywood shot, chased a wide one and feathered it to the wicketkeeper and was out with 1 to win.
Yeah, no, that's...
QR scorer doing cartwheels out of the scorebox, having to do a ball-by-ball scoring of my innings. So,
tell me how many wickets were left in hand, just so as I can see.
80.
Oh, well. Yeah. Look, I think you can be forgiven that. It's just that the gods are cruel, aren't they? I think the gods could have allowed you a thick edge down to third man for 4,
exactly,
couldn't they?
You know, try and hit the winning runs, and that's what happens.
That is brutal. Yeah, you're my kind of cricketer, Dave.
Thanks. I'll say that. That'll go on my cricketing epitaph, that. My kind of...
And Dave very kindly signed the scorecard for my wife because my wife was scoring. For her 40th birthday, he gave her a signed scorecard of Dave's innings.
Did she get RSI from the dots?
She, as I say, she actually cheered when Dave got out. That was how bad it was. But yeah.
Thanks.
So Dave and Dan, the perfect partnership. I'd love to see you two batting together.
Yeah, I mean that's what's going to bring what do they want now? They want families and young people in, don't they? So yeah, me and Dave, we'll do that for you.
That sounds a deal. So you mentioned the end of your club cricket and going into more sort of speaking about it. Now, obviously, you've ended up at TMS, but I know that obviously you started out a little bit more with a different sort of way of cricket commentary and sort of test match sofa. So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that and how you sort of made the jump, if you will, to a mainstream broadcaster and how that came about.
Yeah, it was extraordinary, really, and it's largely thanks to club cricket. That's how it happened. So in 2008, there was this financial crash, and I'd done lots of really ordinary jobs badly because basically I enjoy pleasure and I enjoy and the things that make me pleased are cricket, and I just want to watch cricket and be part of cricket. And in 2005, we'd had the incredible Ashes series, and I was working at that stage miraculously and wrongly as a bad project manager in a financial services company. And I missed a lot of it. I saw some of it by inventing meetings and going to pubs. But I was so kind of furious that as a cricket obsessive, I hadn't been able to just immerse myself in it. Because I was playing cricket, but club cricket on the Saturdays and Sundays. So I was missing the weekends, which I was used to doing because that's normal life. But I wasn't getting the Thursdays and the Fridays and the Mondays, you know. And we had this incredible series, and the first time England had won the Ashes since 86, 87, which, bear in mind, I was like 17. when they won in 86, 87. And so in 2005, I was 36. That's a long chunk of your life. I thought when it happened. So the financial crash happened in 2008. Project managers are utterly useless to man or beast when there's no projects to do. So, you know, when companies decide that's it, we're, you know, sod it, we're just going to keep the sales staff and the admin staff and the, you know, health and safety and the HR. And obviously the CEO on 300 grand a year who's mostly playing golf. But we get rid of you. And they paid me off with a decent sort of redundancy package. It would keep me going for a few months. And then I thought, and I'd worked a lot on the internet up to that point for various different organizations. And I thought, I'm buggered if I'm going to miss this next Ashes. It could be brilliant.
Yeah.
And I was racking my brains to work out how I could justify it to my now wife. And indeed, you know, family and people who care about you and friends as you're descending into indolence. And I thought, but you know what? My brother, who lives in the States, he was complaining that he couldn't hear what was going on in the cricket because he couldn't get hold of the BBC in the States. It was geo-blocked. And the internet was just starting to get good enough to stream live. You know, people were just about starting to get decent enough Wi-Fi. And I thought, well, what if I just commentate it with a couple of mates off the telly, and then people abroad who can't get it can hear it?
Yeah.
Because I kind of think it's an inalienable human right to hear ball-by-ball cricket commentary. Some people think it's an inalienable human right to have freedom of speech. I mean, up to a point, I suppose, but to me, cricket commentary is the most important thing on the planet, having been brought up with it as a kid and listened to it everywhere on the radio, in cars and at school, and, you know, listening under the desk to try to find out the news of what's going on while some idiot's droning on about hypotenuses and physics and stuff you don't give a shit about. And so I thought, I'm going to do this because I can justify it, even though it'll make no money, but I'll pretend it'll make some money. So I'll like develop an entrepreneurial gene. And I suggested this to a load of people at my cricket club. And every cricket club is full of people who love cricket and know cricket and have opinions on cricket. They're some of the most energized and cricket savvy people there are, you know, because they play week in, week out. They've got to work out because they see players they've never seen before. So every week you've got the smart guy going, oh, his bottom hand looks a bit, he's gripping the bat quite tight, you know. So he thinks he knows everything about technique. I thought, well, look, between us and my ridiculous knowledge of 1920s and 30s Test cricket, we can do this. So I put together a team and I developed a lot of awareness of how the internet operates. And as a project manager in IT, I knew lots of people who could help me technically put together the website. So we did this thing called Test Match Safe. I was given the name by a friend of mine who worked in The Guardian, and he'd always had this dream himself, but had never mentioned it to me. So for the first game we did was Cardiff 2009, the incredible Monty Panesar, Jimmy Anderson Test match.
Yeah.
And that was our first game, and we did it from my sitting room here in Tooting. And my mum, very selfishly, snuffed it the week before, very suddenly, from a heart attack, which put a lot of strain, really, on the entire project because, you know, what I should have been doing was hanging out with my family and supporting them at a time of immense grief. But, of course, we had said we were going to set up Test Match Sofa. So, luckily, my brothers had come over from the States and they were looking after. So I actually wasn't commentating to them, as it turned out, after all, because they could watch it on the bloody telly. But my dad was sat at home, having just lost his wife. And I came back here and commentated that Test match. And I've got to be honest, I used alcohol very liberally to, I suppose, to balm the grief, because of the intense grief of, you know, your mother just died. And then this game came, and it was like the greatest salvation. It just totally took me out of all of this. And my dad listened in his own grief, and he sort of seemed, I know it sounds a bit trite, but he was like really cheered up by it, you know. Well, I mean, not generally speaking, because of the wider awfulness of his life that didn't go away. But for a few hours, he was he was able to escape the horror of his moment. So I thought, oh, maybe we should keep going. And then we buried my mum the following week. There's the one day I missed of that series was the only England century. It was the Lord's Test match when Strauss and Cook put Centre Partnership together. And that was my mother's funeral. And then I came back and we did the rest of the series. And then Barney Ronay started writing about it in The Guardian, and Stephen Fry wrote about it. And it was very loose, and we were a bit drunk, and we hadn't worked out how to use sound and, you know, how to bring music into it. And we didn't know very many people in cricket, so we couldn't get guests on and what have you. But because it got a bit of traction and people were talking about it, I thought, well, we'll just keep going. We'll just try it for the South Africa series. South Africa's a good series to do because it's 8 o'clock in the morning, you know.
Yeah.
And so did that, and I met Jared Kimber, who many of you will know from Cricket Info, and we started to realise that we were onto something a bit weird here, because the internet was starting to flourish and Twitter was starting to flourish, and we could start to market this product for, I hate the horrible word, but you know, for want of a better word. And suddenly we were out of nowhere, we were getting like 25, 30,000 listeners live from Australia for the following year, you know, in 2010, 11. It's like, what's happening? We got really small amount of investment to rent a flat that we did it from, so we didn't have to do it from my flat. So my dear wife didn't have to put up with a bunch of rather smelly cricket fans. So then, and also female cricket fans, because we sort of realised there were no women on the radio. So we got women that we knew who loved cricket, and they started to come in, and that gave us a different voice. And through Jared and through George DeBell at Crick Info, who was really helpful, he'd listened and enjoyed it. We got to know the journalists, and they introduced us more to players, and then the players came on, and before you knew it, it was this kind of out of control. It didn't make any money, as everything on the internet doesn't really. No. But it did sort of persist, and it made people angry, and it made people happy in sort of equal measure. The ECB were very angry with it to start with. We weren't paying for the rights, and we were doing the commentary. And people who I think just wanted a bit of freshness, and I think it was just the right time, you know, it was the right place, the right time, and we were being a bit sweary and we were a bit drunk, and then we got comedians all got like Mark Steele on and Rory Bremner and Andy Zoltzman, and before you know it, we had a team that looks very much like Test Match Special today. We had Atif Nawaz and Andy Zoltzman and me. And
as you say, that freshness.
Yeah, and I don't think, you know, it wasn't because any individual one of us was brilliant at it. It was just we got lucky and we got a lot of support, we got a lot of help.
Yeah.
And the communities of the internet, they often get a bad rap for being, you know, we all talk about the trolls and the nastiness and all the bad things happen on the internet. But there's also all the good things, and it's going on today with Guerrilla Cricket. You know, they still have a community, which is Guerrilla Cricket is essentially Test Match Sofa continuing under a different name, and they had to take a different name because the Cricketer magazine had bought them, and they had to change their name to continue. It's that community continues to exist and to support young guys who are coming in. You know, Knuckle Pandy, Gary Naylor has come through that way of doing things. Adam Collins in Australia did a very similar thing with White Line Wire. So I don't know, it wasn't organised or sorted out or thought out. It was lucky, accidental and random, but it was happening with an awful lot of people all at once, all doing it. And it transformed my life from being somebody who got on the tube every day and went to work and looked at spreadsheets and talked to salesmen and had to sit in board meetings with people that I'm afraid I had absolutely zero respect for and an enormous amount of resentment and jealousy towards, and was chewing myself up inside, into somebody who was somehow getting paid to sit at Lords and watch the World Cup final. I mean, how has that happened? I don't know. Well, I do sort of know, but yeah, it's been a dream come true. Really, I can't put it any other way.
So that's how you got into TMS and where you are now. And I was going to go on and ask you about how you found this season in particular and all the various different ways of working that you found here. But the first thing I wanted to ask was sort of TMS of old, the cakes. Are they really as good as you always hear on the radio? Do you end up getting as many as people here? What is it like? I mean, I can't think of anything better than somebody coming to my place of work and giving us a load of cakes. So.
Oh yeah, you'd reckon, wouldn't you? All right, I'll give you an example of I feel really bad about cakes because Tasmat Social was anti-cake. Okay, we set ourselves up as an alternative radio broadcast, which was anti-cake. We were pro Stella, we were pro whiskey, we were pro wine, we were anti-cake. And the thing is that you discover when you get on TMS that actually being sent cake is lovely, and that people who do that do it with the warmest intentions, and it is super, and it's a great tradition. But they're not all great cakes. I mean, you do get some pretty crappy cakes. I have my first ever Tasmat special gig was England against India women at Wormsley, and I remember it so well because I was so proud. I opened the show one day and I heard Soul Limbo in my ears, and I can't believe I'm doing this, And I had what I hope will be the first and last moment of diva-ish behaviour in me. Because I was commentating and I was at this gazebo, and at Wormsley you're just like literally 6 feet above ground level. There's a sort of mound, and you're in a gazebo. It's not like being at Trent Bridge or the Oval or anything like that. And you're behind the bowler's arm, roughly. Not quite, otherwise it will go horribly wrong, but And suddenly these girls came past, and about 15, 16 years old. An awful lot of them obviously had parents who could afford good orthodontists, because there was a lot of that going on. And they were standing in front of me, and I was just going off on a rant about how I would tell you what happened in this ball if it weren't for the fact that there were 15 people standing in front of me, getting in my way. I was about to become the most awful, like Mariah Carey version of a cricket commentator. And I got this note slapped down by Charlie Dagnall, and he said, "Hampshire under 16 ladies, they brought a cake. Describe it." And I had said before, I don't do cake, right? I'm the bad boy of English cricket. I don't do cake. And again, you can see I got slightly above myself in my first season. It was appalling. It's a very good note to self. Anyway, this cake turns up. I hope none of them will be listening to this, but it was a shit cake. It was an unimaginative square chocolate cake, and I was already resentful. And I got a knife and I put it in, and it had no moisture, it had no bounce. I mean, it was dry. The icing was crackly. Do you know what I mean? It was like everything you don't want from a cake. It was semi-stale, with no imagination on the top. There's no decoration of any kind, and I'm supposed to sound grateful. And I decided that I was going to be grudgingly grateful, so I gave a bit of feedback. And then I was given feedback after that by my producers, which was something along the lines of, "You ungrateful bastard." They bought you a sodding cake. And I thought, actually, he's got a point, hasn't he? Because
but
it
now
is
there's
lovely.
a career in that, isn't there? Great British Bake Off.
Well, I know, I was ahead of my time again. Say I pompously. We do get lots of cakes, and a lot of them are absolutely delicious. There's a woman called Sue Dewey who brings in the greatest brownies known to mankind whenever we're at Trent Bridge. They're unbelievable. They're unfeasibly good. I mean, really, there's people have eaten brownies. You eat brownies day in, day out. Well, I don't really, because I'm not really a cake man. But I've had plenty of brownies, and lots of people have had plenty of brownies. But these are like they're sort of brought from Nirvana. You know, they're just extraordinary things. You know, they're moist and they're rich and they're tender and tasty and fuck me, they're extraordinary. And then World Cup final day, I was working for SEN, an Australian channel, but I went up to TMS box, and Camilla, the Duchess of whatever she is, the Duchess of, I don't know. Possibly, yes. I'm not very hot on the Royals, but I should get better at it. But anyway, her, she'd sent this incredible installation made out of sugar, which was the World Cup final with Kane Williamson and Owen Morgan, and a helmet made out of sugar, and you know, I mean, that was like atomic nuclear version of cake, and there's every cake in between. Theresa May brought in some brownies, and all I'll say, I'm not being political here, but they weren't as good as Sue Dewey's. I'll leave it at that. We've had some really incredibly imaginative ones, an amazing one, Eddie. Yes, cake's a big part of it, and to answer your question more succinctly than I have done so far, I didn't think I'd like the cake thing, and now I feel strangely fond of it. And also, it just reminds you that people are doing this for you. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never made a cake for myself. My wife's made one cake in the 24 years we've been together. It was diabolical, incidentally. So if people are going to send you cakes, it behoves me to be grateful.
No, for next year, Neil. Perhaps you best get your apron on, and that's something for you to work on in winter.
Can I make one point though? I was in Bangladesh in 2016-17, my first tour, and the thing about Bangladesh, lovely country, but the booze is exceptionally expensive. Everything else is very cheap. It cost me £20 for a large gin and tonic in my hotel. So the British Commission there came into the box and said, "Is there anything you'd like?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'd like a cheap bottle of gin, if possible, because BBC Pay don't go very far." You know? And they came in with a bloody cake. If there's one thing that they do well in Bangladesh, it's cake. They do cake brilliantly in Bangladesh. They don't do gin. So just a word to anybody out there, if they really want my undying love, a bottle of really lovely gin or whiskey or wine sent to the TMS box just to mix it up a bit. Much appreciated.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more on that one.
So moving on to the 2020 season itself, and I suppose the big buzzword of the season, biosecure. What was it like being in that sort of environment, not being able to leave the ground, being able to move around freely, go for reasonably priced gin, etc., etc.? What was it like?
Well, firstly, and you'll think I'm just towing a party line, but I'm genuinely not. It was a massive privilege, and I say that because if you take yourself back into my brain in late July, because I missed the first two test matches. I did 3 of the last 4, so I could hear my colleagues doing it, and I wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
And I've been in lockdown from 23rd of March, wasn't it? I think when we were all into lockdown. And I'm a freelancer, so I wasn't getting paid, and I had all the same anxieties and worries as everybody else about where work was going to come from, and I had all the same sort of the lonelinesses, of not seeing people. So getting the opportunity to go into the bubble, I saw as like liberation.
Yeah.
I suppose the one slight awkwardness was that just as people were coming out of lockdown, I had to sort of go back deeper into lockdown because I couldn't use public transport or really see people, go to restaurants, what have you. But it was a tiny price to pay for getting to go to the ground and see all your mates, get to work with Aggers and Tuffers and Borny and Ebony and Isha and Ali and Simon Mann and all that, and to get to use a bar again, because the hotel had a bar.
Yeah.
And I was like in a bar with other human beings. So my experience of it was a little different, I think, from the players and the other commentators to a degree, because by the time I arrived, a lot of them had got not pig sick of it, that's going too far, but they'd done it and they'd been there. Whereas I was like, woo, party, which might have been quite irritating for them on reflection, but I didn't bother to reflect. I just charged straight in a bar and got a couple of bottles of wine and said, "Tell me, what's it all like?" So it was initially really exciting, and to get to watch cricket again was absolutely brilliant. You know, I think over the course of the whole season, I was again quite lucky because I came in and out of the bubble. So I'd have a week off and then a week back in, and a week off, week back in. Whereas people like Isha and Ali, you'll see, were working, you know, non-stop for sort of 5 6 weeks and not getting to go home and not getting to do anything. And I think for them, I'm not going to speak for them, but it must have been hard. You know, having to get your washing, your dry cleaning done and everything in there, and you're seeing the same people every day, and it's the same kind of food, and it's very enclosed. You know, when you're in Old Trafford particularly, the people there were lovely to us, superb, but you are inside the ground. You know, you don't go past the metal gates.
I was going to say, was it different being at Old Trafford, where you are, as you say, essentially locked in a suburb, in the suburbs of Old Trafford, compared to, say, Southampton, where you have the golf course and things like that? Into sort of
totally different. And weirdly, it's psychological because I never bothered to move onto the golf course at all. But I had a balcony hotel room looking out over the ground. I could see the trees and the grass and the golf course to my left. I mean, of course, when you finish a game of cricket, and they were all rain affected, so we weren't off air till gone 7. And you then do the interviews, and then you get downstairs and you eat, and then you go to the bar, and then you get up as late as you possibly can. You never bloody see the golf course. So it doesn't make any difference, but you're just back at work. But psychologically, it was different, definitely. And Old Trafford couldn't help that. It's just the way it is. You know, you look out and it's enclosed. So that was, I think, hard to a degree, but you know, we're talking about minimal levels of hardness for the broadcasters, to be brutally honest with you. I mean, don't go on it too long, but you know, we incarcerate people in prisons. They spend 23 hours a day in a cell. My mental health could cope with 6 days watching cricket and having a piss up with my mates. I'll be brutally frank with you. I felt more for all the people who would have loved to have gone to the game and couldn't get to go, and all the fans who wanted to be there. And I hope that we sort of managed to simulate something along the lines of normalcy, but it wasn't normal for everybody, and I kind of think it's a bit unseemly to complain about getting to be there, you know, when nearly everybody couldn't.
And you mentioned use of the bar in an evening and things like that. And I think there was on social media about things like games nights and stuff. How did you manage to pass all the free time that you had sort of in between the matches and at the end of the day?
It was brilliant for like I say again, for me, because I tended to be in and out, so I didn't have a lot of down days as such. Bumble did a quiz one night. One of the lovely things happened was that the Sky and BBC commentators got closer together, because normally we're in separate hotels, you know, and you know, we see each other during the day, but we're working, so you get a little bit of a chat, a bit of lunch and tea, but you develop quite a surface friendship. Whereas in the bubble, you know, you get to sit down with Michael Holding and get to talk to him about what it was like to do that incredible piece of TV, you know, on the first day of the series. Bumble did us a quiz, which was marvellous, full of massive arguments, you know, everybody questioning, what do you mean? You know, he was the first king of England, stuff like that. You know? And you got to make different and deeper friendships. It was superb. But for me, my highlight was the games night, which was Sky and the BBC commentators were together in what's called the Red Rose Suite. It sounds very exciting, doesn't it? The Red Rose Suite.
I sit up there myself.
Right, it's a bit of a prefab. It's not the OCS stand at the Oval. It really isn't. But it's got a table tennis table, and I beat Michael Holding at table tennis at Old Trafford. So I was an Englishman who beat Michael Holding at Old Trafford. Brian Close, David Steele, John Edrich, stick that. I mean, I was insufferable after that. I just kept wandering around. Yes, take that, Mikey. And we played darts. We had darts tournaments. Andy Zoltzman brought in a bagatelle table from the 19th century, an old Victorian bagatelle table.
My word.
We had a Bond quiz. We had all sorts of stuff. You know, it was. Let's put it this way: it was like how I imagine a Japanese prisoner of war camp would have been like, with lots of food, lots of booze, and without sadists.
And
So it's like all the good bits of it, without any of the bad bits. You know?
In and around all that time, did any of your colleagues reveal any interest in hobbies or anything apart from bagatelle?
Yeah. Well, there was one hobby that Jonathan Agnew learning the ukulele.
Yes.
And my God, he played that ukulele a lot.
I get a bit of resentment there, Dan.
No resentment. You know, just trauma, really. He actually got quite good at the ukulele. It was when he added the singing on top of it that it got that was sort of ruined the underlying bass ukulele. Really, you call it bass, but you know, the ukulele track. There was a bit of that. There was. Ali Mitchell did a lot of work. She's the most hardworking person in cricket, her and Isha Gupar. So she basically was a shop steward for the Cricket Writers Club. So she was dealing with all of that at the same time. While we're going, come out for a drink. And then she's got like a mountain of paperwork to do. You could totally envisage it. There were games that were played. So we played cricket in the forecourt under the floodlights. And I don't know if this is really a hobby, but Anna Mountford, our producer, unveiled, I think, a switch hit against Shane Warne at some point, which was pretty amazing. And I hope Mounty won't mind me saying this, but you know, Mounty is he could do with losing a bit of weight. He's had quite a sedentary life, and in his late 40s, and he's just smashed Shane Warne for a virtual six. That was a great moment. But in terms of hobbies, there was a lot. There was no crocheting or macrame or any of that kind of thing, making paper aeroplanes. It was mostly serious chatting. That's what you mostly did. Some people played golf. Isha got hit by a cricket ball at one point. A golf ball on the course at the Aegeus. But no, the ukulele was the single most obvious of the hobbies. Yeah.
Why do I get a feeling? I'm sure you'll both correct me. Does Joe Root play the ukulele? Why have I got that in the back of my mind that Joe Root once played the ukulele?
Is it because you imagine him as George Formby deep down?
Possibly.
You could sort of see him.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know why that got in my head then. Don't know. There you go.
He might do. He might well do. Actually, I have a frightening feeling you might be onto something, Neil.
I just feel like I've seen it on social media somewhere that he was playing a ukulele. I'm going to dig into that after this.
Dude, Aggers will have probably got him into it. Because Aggers is very good at that.
If it is, I'm definitely putting a photo of it over the top of this. 100%.
And
there will be no photo here if not. So if you're watching this, everyone, I'm either right or wrong, so you'll be able to tell. So.
And that's a rather magnificent segue into the next question of current players. So one of my highlights of the summer when I was listening to TMS was Carlos Brathwaite doing the shipping forecast. That was quite a brilliant bit of radio. And he just seems to fit in really well and just got the whole idea behind it and just came across really well. Just your view really about whether you think it'd be good. We've seen like Stuart Broad as well do a little bit of work with Sky. Do you think it'd be good for more current players to do things like that and get involved in a little bit of media work before they've actually retired?
Yeah, it's a very difficult one actually for them because some of them take to it brilliantly. Carlos was amazing. He just got the vibe of the show really, really well, and that's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you're not listen to it all your life. Yeah. But he did. He just got it. He was really sensitive. And he had high emotional or IQ, do they call it? But it's that he just kind of got it. Stuart's also splendid. The difficulty for players while they're playing is that it's very hard to do punditry on people that you're going to play with. So I wouldn't advise it too much, because for that very reason, you know, Jimmy does great stuff for us on white ball cricket mostly, because he's a bit removed from the white ball team, so he's able to do that. But you know, if you got him in talking about the test team and it's happening, they're so emotionally engaged in the side themselves, and they're really supportive. This current England team, especially, is very supportive of each other. So you don't want to ask them as a ball by baller those nasty questions that will make them have to say something that, you know, because these guys are pretty sensitive, you know, about the performance, stuff like that. So, so you don't want them to put them in a difficult spot. I think, from a purely selfish point of view, as long as they stick to punditry and don't do ball by ball, I'll welcome them all in. Yeah. Once they start nicking my job, then
Different matter.
Oh yeah, I'll undermine them as much as I possibly can. No, but seriously, yeah, I mean, with Carlos, it worked because he's a T20 player now. He's not really playing Test cricket, so he could do that as well. And he's a bit more mature, he's a bit older. And with Stuart as well, it's great because he's just a natural at it. He's got it. He knows how to do broadcasting. I think when they leave, I think a really good place for them to do nursery slopes is local radio, BBC Radio, county radio. That's a really great place for them to do stuff, because they don't get asked terribly challenging questions, because it's quite positive about the local team anyway. Yeah. So, you know, Ant Gibson isn't going to ask a Somerset player to be nasty about the Somerset team. He's going to get them used to it, and that is a good place, I think, for people to cut their teeth, because we don't want to make too many great claims for it. Broadcasting is a bit more difficult than just turning up and talking. You've got to sort of do a bit more than that, and you can't just sort of fall out of a cricket career and then be able to describe what you want to say, you know, use words well and have the right timing and modulate your voice and all those kind of things. So yeah, I would say radio is a great place to kick it off.
Just a brief word on the actual test matches we saw and some of the great finishes that we saw, in particularly the Pakistan game at Old Trafford, with that run chase was pretty remarkable. Do you think that was because or in spite of the biosecure status, the lack of crowds, or do you think maybe having crowds in would have had different results ultimately?
Dave, that is a terrific question, and it's obviously it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to know because there's counterfactuals involved here. But I asked Shan Masood a similar question after he scored his 150 in the first game, I think it was, about what it was like playing there in a bio bubble, and he said, well, weirdly, it had both positive and negatives out on the field. The positive was that he could shut out any other noise and relax into his way of playing, because we're all at our best in the nets, aren't we? How many times do you hear people say he's playing brilliantly in the nets?
Oh yeah, and the world's best, and the world's best net batsman.
you're 4 off 52 balls in the net. But by the same token, he said that also you could get yourself into a place where you forgot the intensity of the game, and he needed Shadab Khan to say to him, right, come on, this is the moment where we're going to change the game. And if you remember, he and Shadab suddenly went on a big go, and all in that incredible game changed the whole tenor of the match in a partnership there. So it had positives and it had negatives, and it depended on the type of player. I don't know about that partnership between Butler and Wokes. It was genius, wasn't it? I mean, it was just absolutely, for me, the highlight of the summer. It was just so perfectly judged by both of them. They were timing the ball so fantastically. They had such a clarity of thought. They realised that the game was gone unless they won it. And then that made them, I think, just be ultra positive, but also really just play the best versions of themselves. And I was so delighted because they're two of my favourite cricketers. They're both lovely men, and Butler is the man I've always wanted to to really make it at Test level, because I still believe that the greatest day you could ever have at cricket is if Butler comes in at 11 o'clock and is still there at 6, and that will be your best ever day of cricket you'll ever see. So I was, so it's a good question. I haven't given you a really proper answer, except to say that I think it did and it didn't. I think it helped up a bit. Do you know what? I think it might not have helped perhaps captains, because that sense of drift that could happen when you don't hear that noise going around, maybe you're not as alert to the changing moment. There's that just sort of there's a sense of not soporific, but maybe the game gets away from you without you quite realizing it. I felt that happened a bit to Azarali, and I wonder if it would have been different if there'd been an atmosphere there to have changed it. But I'm not going to take anything away from Wokes and Butler. They were just brilliant.
No, indeed. That's the questions I have. So I will hand you over to Neil for a couple of other areas of debate.
As we've already discussed during a lot of this so far, Dan, we always try it on Up the Dale to bring it back to elements that affect club cricket and things that we've all experienced, but we want to try and sort of integrate what your experiences are with international cricket as well. So one thing we wanted to know was, from an international player's perspective, do you think there's some things that they have either, I don't want to use the word forgotten about, but sort of lost sight of the club game, that or they could take influence from the club game to more develop their game? And some of the examples we're giving into, some players may have lost just playing for the fun. And I know it's not just playing for the fun at international cricket, but have lost some element of the fun, or some of the old club elements of maybe having a drink after the game within reason, and we understand it's a professional environment. Do you think there's some club cricket elements that international players have either lost or could still get back?
Oh, I think they can get them all back. But what I would say is I don't think it's as easy as to say play for fun. You know, I think a professional cricketer will get great fun when it's going well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, their lives depend on this. I mean, there's not only is there money at stake, which is, you know, what they're getting paid to do, but sometimes it's a lot of money. Sometimes it's not a lot of money. You know, Pakistan players don't get paid an awful lot of money for playing, and you know, county cricketers like Ollie Rayner, mate of mine, you know, played for Middlesex. It's on a very, you know, they're on modest salaries, these guys, and they're wondering where the next contract's coming from. So anxiety is all over them.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to tell somebody to have fun when your job's on the line and your future's uncertain. So I don't think it's as easy as that. I think actually what they might have a little bit of lost and can certainly get back is two things. One is that the game itself is owned by everybody who loves it. And this is not their fault. It's just that once it becomes your profession, there's this sort of sense that you know more about it than anybody else, and it's yours. And in fact, there's hundreds of thousands of recreational cricketers, men and women and girls and boys, and there's fans who all love it. And I don't mean that they're doing this for us to have a responsibility. I mean just to remember that there are all those opinions and there are all those people, and that it is ultimately a game that's owned by all of those people.
Yeah.
I think that's something that they could remember a bit more often. The other one is that I think actually when you play club cricket, you have to do all your thinking yourself. You don't have a coach that tells you exactly what's going on, a captain who absolutely knows what's going on. Because we pitch up on a Saturday, we might have had the odd net here and there. So just that little bit of learning to stand on your own two feet. And I'm not saying that they don't do that. There's loads of players who do. Ollie Pope's a brilliant learner. He learns. Joe Root is a guy who is constantly talking about the game. But there are some players for whom the support network is so strong, it sort of becomes a safety net that stops them actually having to analyse the game in the moment, you know, and they're thinking only about the plan and that it's all quite programmed. And we all know that cricket's completely random. And if you play club cricket, you know it's really, really random. So those have been the two areas, and I don't mean them as criticisms, but they're perhaps things that you get a little bit lost in professional cricket, or you see a bit.
Yeah. Switching that around, and this is something that we could probably talk about for quite a while, because considering what we've talked about previously. Do you think there's anything as club cricketers that are observing the professional game that we could bring into our games? The mental approach, the physical approach, warm-ups as a prime example in terms of what club cricket, certainly at a lower level, probably never does. Anything like that you think club cricket should and probably should take up more readily?
Absolutely, both of those. You're turning up like I used to do 5 minutes before the game and then hoping that you can perform is ridiculous. You've got to get there before, and you've got to visualize. You've got to think about the game that you're playing. You've got to take what you're doing seriously on the pitch.
Yeah.
Not so much off the pitch. And professionals are brilliant at that. You know, we see how hard they go at it when they cross the line. And then when they come off it, you talked about having a beer after the game. A lot of them do. A lot of them get on really well. A lot of them chat to each other a lot of the time. You know, they're very good at that. The club cricketers need to learn to do the first bit as well. Yeah. They need to get there an hour before the game and actually take that part of it seriously, because then they'll have a much better game. You know, they'll play it better. They'll enjoy it better. Fielding. Every club cricketer, apart from a few nutters, sees fielding as a chore that they don't want to have to do. Well, actually, the serious professionals, with a few exceptions, they gamble about like loonies. They do fielding practice beforehand, and you do half an hour fielding drill, and don't make it really hard for yourself by just doing a series of sadistic high balls, but do lots of running, lots of stops and throws, and enjoy each other's company. One thing that's really noticeable about good professionals, the England team's very good at this, is supporting each other. Yeah. And in club cricket, I know we love the inter-club banter, but actually it can get a bit much if you just keep on like winding someone up and taking the piss out of them. People need to be built up as well. They need to be made to feel that they're actually quite good. And the England team are terrific at fostering this spirit of helping each other so that they can be the best versions of themselves. And it sounds a bit mawkish and a bit silly, and aren't we all in it for a bit of a laugh and to take the piss out of Kev? Well, I don't mean, sorry, I just said Kev. I didn't mean KP. That's a generic Kev. But you know what I mean. I think sometimes actually sort of like letting your teammate know that he's done a really good job there, and he's bowled a really good spell, and he's batted really well, he's bowled really well. That is something that club cricketers could do an awful lot better.
Yeah.
No, for next season, Neil.
Yeah.
See, now you do. You're being passive aggressive, Dave.
Me?
You try and be the best captain you can sometimes, Dan, but ultimately, you can only take people so far, can't you? That's the problem.
You're talking
I'm not getting involved.
You're talking to the captain, Dan, who lost 8 out of 9 tosses this season.
Look, you cannot blame a captain for that. How many times did he call?
Half. Exactly, Dan. Half at least.
Because the ones he's not calling, he's not lost. I really hate it when a captain gets done like for losing a toss when he doesn't even get to call. What's he supposed to do?
Do you know what, Dave? Man after my own heart. How many times have I said that this season?
Fair few.
100%. But yeah, no. Going back to your point, Dan, I 100% agree. It is something that I've got to say we try and do in the second team, and I know Scott, our first team captain's tried to do a lot more this year, harbouring that spirit of making sure that playing to people's strengths and then building those strengths up. And you do see a lot of it not happening. Certainly 100% agree. Club cricket needs to do that more often. The banter culture is great to an extent, and then you've got to build that team atmosphere, and that'll only harbour good results off the back of it. 100%.